The Carolina Panthers finally took out the trash today. They have fired Frank Reich after 11 games where we're seeing this offense look terrible. Bryce Young hasn't looked great. And Frank Reich, this dude was a shitty head coach. He was Urban Meyer bad. You see, people are trying to make it seem like the decision to draft Bryce Young is one of the worst decisions of all time, and it's not. It's unfair to call Bryce Young a bust when he's been given a terrible situation led by a terrible head coach. And there were some people who I was going back and forth with on Instagram saying that Frank Reich needed more time. He didn't have enough talent around him. Like, no. Frank Reich is the reason why this team was as bad as what it was, because of poor roster management, poor scheme. When your rookie quarterback plays this bad, and he's supposed to be a really good prospect, there's a problem with the coaching. And Trevor Lawrence had a similar situation in his rookie season when Urban Meyer was his head coach. And you saw how better Trevor Lawrence has looked since year one with Urban compared to how good he is right now with Doug Peterson. You see, Frank Reich having Adam Thielen as his number one wide receiver was a problem. The offensive line was worse this season than what it was last season. At the end of last season, Carolina had a top 12 offensive line. The defense is the only bright spot about this team. The offense, anytime you're an offensive-minded coach and your offense struggles to put up 17, 20 points, they're not good. There's no reason why Frank Reich deserved any more time. And David Tepper, this dude has no problem with sticking his hands in the cookie jar. The sign of a good owner, a good CEO, is somebody who hires employees and allows them to do their job. So word on the street is that CJ Stroud was the preferred quarterback by Frank Reich in this coaching staff. And apparently David Tepper said, "No, fuck that. Draft Bryce Young. Either you draft him or you're going to get the pink slip." So, of course, they got to listen to their boss, and they got to draft Bryce Young. And anytime you have situations like this, when you have a controlling owner that doesn't allow the coaches to make the decisions or allows the guys that they hire to make the decisions, you're not going to have a really good football team, because leadership has to be good all the way from the top. And David Tepper hasn't proven to be a good leader. Carolina has had so many head coaches ever since they parted ways with Ron Rivera. And a common denominator that you kind of hear from these head coaching decisions is that David Tepper kind of is a little bit of a control freak. Not even a little bit. He's a big control freak. Now, if we're being honest and unbiased, then we really are looking at this situation from a logical standpoint. With how trash the Carolina Panthers roster is on the offensive side of the football, CJ Stroud wouldn't be any better than what Bryce Young is right now. Now, he would be better, but the Carolina Panthers still would be a crappy football team. You see, Houston, they did a better job at finding a way to build around their young quarterback than what Carolina did. And I'm surprised that their general manager hasn't been fired yet neither, because he's a big reason why this team is as bad as what it was. They traded away DJ Moore, their number one wide receiver, for Bryce Young, when Chicago probably would have taken Brian Burns. You see, it would have hurt to give up Brian Burns. He is a pretty good pass rusher, but he's not an elite one. He's not a Nick Bosa or Michael Parsons or a TJ Watt. And if I'm drafting a quarterback number one overall, I should put more emphasis on building around him versus trying to hold on to a pass rusher. I'd rather have traded Brian Burns instead of having to give up DJ Moore. You see, the Carolina Panthers didn't have a lot of vision with what they wanted to do with a young quarterback. It's just like they was like, fuck it, we just need a young quarterback, and they drafted one, and they were just winging it. And they did a really poor job of setting Bryce Young up for success, and that's a big reason why Frank Reich had to go. For anybody who thought that Frank Reich needed any more time, I really question if you watched the Carolina Panthers play this year. You see, when you have a good coach, you can overcome not having a lot of talent. But Bryce Young looks like a worse quarterback in the NFL than what he ever did at Alabama. And I get tired of people who do all this helmet scouting. If you watched Bryce Young at Alabama, you would know that he wasn't carried by the talent that Bama had. Those were some of the worst teams that Nick Saban ever had. And Nick Saban would tell you that Bryce Young was a large reason why Alabama was able to win the amount of games that they did. After Bryce Young's final season at Alabama, Nick Saban got rid of his whole entire coaching staff. You know what he said? He said that we were too Bryce Young dependent. Bryce Young was a really promising prospect, and he's just been ruined by awful coaching. You see, you people have to stop making it seem like coaching doesn't matter. This shit does matter. Only a casual thinks coaching doesn't matter. CJ Stroud has the Miko Ryans and a really good offensive coordinator. He has a really good situation. Hell, he's better at drafting wide receivers than what the Carolina Panthers are. Outside of DJ Moore, they haven't hit on a single wide receiver in the draft. The Houston Texans, they called up CJ Stroud in the 3rd round. They said, hey, CJ, who do you think we should draft that wide receiver? He said, man, we need to get my boy Tank here. Let's get it. And you see what Tank Dell is doing. Tank Dell would be the #1 wide receiver on the Carolina Panthers roster right now. Their most reliable weapons have been old man Adam Thielen and Hayden Hurst. That's a problem. Not to mention that they've overpaid massively for Miles Sanders. They're overpaying for a running back that's not even the best RB on his team. The offensive line stinks. What the hell do you want Bryce Young to do to succeed? This dude has to overcome terrible coaching. You could tell Frank Reich was a bad play caller when he gave it up to the OC. And then he took it back, which apparently set a couple of people in the organization off. This was an awful hire by the Carolina Panthers. And at first, initially, I thought that this was going to be a pretty good hire by them. But I didn't know that Frank Reich just was going to forget how to be a good football coach, because at one point, he was a pretty solid coach. But you see, I guess the older he's gotten, the more out of touch he's gotten with the game, because this was an awful coaching tenure that we saw. And this is one of the worst head coaching hires and tenures that has happened in recent memory. This is just as bad as Urban Meyer. I promise you that whoever Carolina hires is going to be good enough to have Bryce Young playing at a good level. I'm getting a little annoyed that people are already writing off Bryce Young and acting like his situation doesn't matter. There's been plenty of quarterbacks who got better coaching after poor rookie seasons who bounced back. Jared Goff, for example, he was awful under Jeff Fisher. They hired Sean McVay, and he's been playing at a pretty solid level ever since. Same thing with Trevor Lawrence. They got rid of Urban Meyer, they kicked his ass to the curb, and they brought in Doug Peterson. The Panthers really need to nail their head coaching hire, and they want to make sure that everything that they gave up for Bryce Young for the #1 overall pick last year was warranted, because right now it looks like the Bears are winning this trade. So let me know how you guys are feeling about Carolina finally firing Frank Reich. Who do you like for them to hire to replace him?